I'm going to tell you right now, with a tear in my eye, this is the greatest moment of my life. And on January 19th, 1992, wrestling fans all over the world were able to bear witness to arguably, but in my opinion, the absolute greatest Royal Rumble of all time. I'm John Rentham with the Retro Review / Redux of WWE's Royal Rumble 1992 event. Let me know your thoughts on this show in the comments, please. Yes, I know about 5 years ago, I did retro reviews of various events, and 4 years ago, I decided to retro review this. But I've decided to basically add some more analysis to select reviews, and also I just wanted to talk more about the 1992 Royal Rumble, because WWE, and actually wrestling in general, was going through a state of flux in 1992 because you had the upcoming steroid trial. You had a lot of talents that would be gone from the company by right after Mania 8. And truth be told, this actually was probably the last great event that they put on, because yes, you have Mania 8, you have other stuff that I've talked about, and longtime fans like myself, I'm going to be 44 really soon. This is honestly the last, peak of the golden era, because by 1993, we would have Brett, we would have Shawn, we would have Razor, we'd have Diesel on the goddamn rise, Sean Waltman, we would have various people that would do well. But this also proves that Vince really didn't have the stranglehold on wrestling like Chris Benoit had on his family about 15 years later, but I digress. Yeah, I'm going to add some jokes, I'm going to add some snark, I'm going to add some goddamn mean commentary, but also some fun. This wasn't a Knickerbocker Arena, no Hulk. I said Knickerbocker Arena. You have to be really careful even, saying Knickerbocker Arena. It's now the MVP Arena. It's part of the syndicate of hurting people. In Albany, New York, 17,000 fans. And if you Google WWE pay-per-view buy rates, you actually will find a couple pages. You will find one from WrestleNomics, you will find one from WrestleTalk, and they're good sources. Only 260,000 people bought this pay-per-view. Now, at this point, the closed circuit stuff, that pretty much was gone. I'm not saying closed circuit, didn't still exist, but pay-per-view was more widespread by this point. But WWE was starting to struggle here. I mean, WCW, granted, wouldn't even come close to 260,000 pay-per-view buys until 1994, when Hogan and Flair got close to that. It was 225 or 250,000. I forget the exact number. But if you take a look at previous Rumble events, 1988 would be pointless to look at for pay-per-view buys because it was on the USA Network, airing head-to-head with the pay-per-view offering, the Bunkhouse Stampede from the Nassau Coliseum. So we go 1989. The Summit in Houston. Shrieking Paul Bosch noises. Actually, I think Paul Bosch was dead by, it was either January or mid-89. I mean, the motherfucker was old, so never. And they probably had to, expand the head part of the casket to fit his ears in, and that's mean. Paul Bosch was a great promoter. But the Summit in Houston, 19,000 fans, 165,000 pay-per-view buys. So they had room to grow. And again, 89, you're looking at, I believe Mania 5 was the first one that was offered on full pay-per-view. Because 88, yes, it had pay-per-view, it had closed circuit stuff, but nevertheless, 1990 was in Orlando, 16,000 pay-per-view buys, 260,000, or 19,000, or 16,000 fans, 260,000 pay-per-view buys. And then we go to Miami in 1991, that was 16,000 fans, 440,000 pay-per-view buys. So they were ascending at that point. And 89, of course, oddly enough, had Big John Studd win the Rumble, and then Hogan won the Rumble in 1990, facing off against the Ultimate Warrior. By the way, fuck the Ultimate Warrior, I'm glad he's dead, and fuck Hulk Hogan forever. Fuck the Hulk Hogan, as Iron Sheik said. Drew a ton of goddamn money. Sheik did, but Hogan drew way more. But Hogan has torpedoed his own career. He was a con artist, has always been a con artist. Most people have seen through that, and Randy Savage is always better. Can't deny his drawing ability, can't deny how commercially successful he was. But I can knock the person all I want, and I will. And in 1993, Sacramento, California, 16,000 fans, and they had around 300,000 pay-per-view buys. And 1991, by the way, actually was notable for having Hogan and Earthquake work the final little bit, and There was some good stuff there. That was actually a pretty good Rumble overall. Rick Martel and Greg Valentine lasted, so Rick Martel lasted about 52, 53 minutes, and Greg Valentine lasted 45. So, it was also pretty much the last time that Rick Martel was featured in any kind of prominent spot. That's the sad thing. Now, we go back a couple months into Joe Louis Arena for Survivor Series 91, which really was just a promotional tactic for Tuesday in Texas, and was a pretty weak offering for Survivor Series, but they still got 17,500 fans, and they had 300,000 pay-per-view buys. So realistically, not all that, different from what they would draw for this particular Rumble. But since Tuesday in Texas was Vince McMahon's experiment, and they were going to try and, run weekly pay-per-views, I could have understood monthly pay-per-views, even back then, but my word. But they were at the Joe and Harry Freeman Coliseum in San Antonio, Texas for Tuesday in Texas. Literally a week, maybe 8 days later, but 8,000 fans and 140,000 pay-per-view buys. So, granted, the show is probably at least mostly successful, but not successful enough to warrant the fact that weekly pay-per-views are needed. But then we go to Mania 8 in the Hoosier Dome. 62,000 fans or thereabouts, and 390,000 pay-per-view buys. So, again, pretty successful, and I believe right around what Mania 7 ended up drawing. And really was one of the last decent Mania draws, because then when we got to Mania 13, my God, they were like at 250,000 pay-per-view buys. But we go SummerSlam 92 in Wembley, 79,000 fans or thereabout, and 280,000 pay-per-view buys. And then Survivor Series 92, huge turnover rate at that point in Richfield, where they had 18,000 fans and 250,000 pay-per-view buys. But yeah, the 93 event drew a little bit more, and this one drew quite a bit less than the 91 edition. So yeah, they were starting to kind of have some issues here. So even though they tied the 1991, they were starting to have these issues. And even though talents were, still performing hard, they needed a new crop of talent. So speaking of which, let's talk about that crop of talent. They brought in Chris Walker. Google Chris Walker, the wrestler, and you will see why Vince McMahon would have wanted to sign him against the Brooklyn Brawler. I mean, there are worse ways to start the show, I suppose. Monsoon and Heenan were absolutely on fire. The performance of Bobby Heenan's life, of his career. Him and Monsoon were absolute gold together. Heenan's Hall of Fame speech where he says there's only one thing missing. I wish Monsoon was here. Still fucking gets me. But the new foundation, Owen Hart and Jim the Anvil Neidhart, in very, very, giant and colorful parachute pants. Not Zubaz, but just parachute pants with weird suspenders. They took on the Orient Express, Kato and Pat Tanaka, with Mr. Fuji. And the parachute pants just always make me laugh. Like, it's just really sad looking at some of these older events and realizing how many people have passed away. Owen, obviously, probably the most tragic. I would say arguably, I hate to rank that stuff, but easily the most preventable. And Jim Neidhart, unfortunately, no longer with us. Lived a number of years, but still. And Mr. Fuji got in bad health and died a number of years later. I'm glad he was able to be inducted in the Hall of Fame while he was still alive. The crowd was up for this. It wasn't as good as the Orient Express versus the Rockers on the 1991 event. I still love how the commentary references the fact that Bret the Hitman Hart took on the Mountie against doctor's orders and had a fever, 104-degree fever, and Bobby Heenan said, I had a 13-degree temperature, that's no big deal. Later says, I took one of those, half of those little children, bears, knocked it right out of me. But Monsoon mentioned the Midnight Express. I totally forgot about that. That was cool. A rocket launcher ends up winning it. It's not a bad opener. It's actually pretty entertaining overall. Neidhart would be gone from the company soon after this. Owen would float around for a bit until he was going to leave, and then Bret wanted him to stay and basically sold Vince on the feud, the brother versus brother thing, which really should have led to Owen being the WWF champion. And had they actually gone through with something in 1994, he would have been the champion going into SummerSlam, where Bret could have won it back, and it would have been nice to see. Lord Alfred Hayes, by the way, recasts Brett losing to the Mountie. And then the Mountie is talking. Jimmy Hart mainly just shouts, lets it all out. That man has energy that we couldn't do without. And Jimmy Hart's megaphone, come on. I tried to make that Ryan Piper. Also cuts a promo. Basically, Piper against the Mountie for the Intercontinental title. The Mountie had just won it recently. And the reason this was done is Brett apparently was going to possibly go and sign with WCW for a lot of money. Pillman said what he was earning. They knew each other from Calgary. The idea was, hey, come over here. But Brett, I guess, wasn't going to be able to get out of his deal for, it was either July or September. I forget what he said in the shoot interview. But it's just as well that Brett ended up staying. I mean, Brett in WCW would have been nice to see. Him versus Rick Rude, him versus Ricky Steamboat if they wanted to go that route, him versus Pillman, him versus Sting when both were actually motivated and not as broken down. And it would have been nice to maybe see Brett against Stunning Steve Austin and various other people. I don't know if Brett versus Shane Douglas would have drawn anything, but nevertheless, Brett made the right decision to stay. Because, yes, he would end up going to WCW about 5 years later for, or almost, about 5.5 years later for way, way more money, but then no creative at all. But it was Piper against the Mountie for the Intercontinental title. And really, this was just Piper jump-starting. The Mountie getting in a little bit of offense. Jock just got destroyed here, mainly. The commentary was gold. Heenan knocking Piper. Shock being a decent enough heel. A sleeper wins it. I did like when, he got the sleeper locked on and Heenan's yelling at Jimmy, do something. I don't know why that got me. And then the cattle prodding, they played the shock stick thing over the PA, which I never understood even as a kid. But that being said, what just makes me laugh about this whole damn thing is that Piper won the Intercontinental title, but actually only hold it for a couple months. And he actually ended up doing pretty well for himself in 92. But then after that match with Brett, he would end up leaving for some time. So he actually had a pretty good few months. But then a Coliseum video exclusive with Hogan. And man, he was less animated, actually talking like a normal human being that hates black people. And by the way, in case you're wondering why Hogan got booed, one, he's not relevant now. And this is at the most recent Raw. So I'm recording this shortly after the Raw debut on Netflix. Hogan deserved to be booed every single bit. Now, Hogan at this point was still a pretty big draw, but because of the appearance in the Arsenio Hall show and a variety of things, Hogan was going to be gone pretty soon because he thought he could make it in Hollywood, despite the fact he couldn't really fucking act at all. When your best movie is possibly Suburban Commando, that is saying something. Yes, there's no holds barred. It's not a great movie. So, Bo and Blake, the Beverly Brothers, boy, I'm just still amazed that one of the Beverly Brothers, his son, was in wrestling. Von Wagner. My God. Yeah, Mike Enos was part of the team also. They were the former Destruction Crew in the AWA. And it was just, the AWA was dead by, pretty much 88, if we're being perfectly honest. But they limped along to, 90, 91, technically. But they were given the weird purple capes, and they had the Genius, a.k.a. Lanny Poffo, as their manager. And by this point, the Genius really didn't mean anything. And the Bushwhackers came out, Luke and Butch, may they rest in peace. And Jameson was there. A nerdy guy that I don't know why they did this. And the Bushwhackers, you could look at what Luke and Butch did as the Sheep Herders for a number of years. Bloody, brutal feuds, bloody matches, incredible violence, for that time. It is no wonder that they couldn't really move by even 85, 86. And when they signed with the WWF, the WWF at the time, that is, Vince gave them a more child-friendly, cartoonish gimmick, and honestly, they earned more money taking less bumps than they probably ever did in the previous 15 or so career years that they had as wrestlers in the territories, New Zealand, Australia, America. Oh, yeah! There you go. There's the bushwhacker dance, because why not? But yeah, they earned a good living, and again, may they both rest in peace. But the crowd loved it. We got the two managers involved, and a double axe handle variation after a foot trip gets the victory for the Beverly Brothers, and then we get a brief fracas, and we get Jameson and the Genius involved. And, I mean, it entertained the crowd. Work rate was shit, but it entertained the crowd. So, then we had the Legion of Doom talking backstage, and they wouldn't even be around for the rest of 1992 because Hawk couldn't control his demons. But Hawk and Animal, Mean Gene talking, and man, all three of those guys are dead. Hawk would barely make it. He made like 11 years after this, 11 and a half. Animal died in like 2020, 2021. And the natural disasters come out, and John Tenta, it's a real shame. If he had only gotten diagnosed sooner and been able to have that addressed. His bladder cancer, I think is what it was. Just a real shame. I mean, very sad. I mean, that's not even a joke. I really wish that John Tenta was still here. I wish he would have been able to have been inducted in the Hall of Fame while he was still alive. Because I don't think he's been inducted in the Hall of Fame. And they've inducted other people that have done less in the company when Earthquake was pretty over for a number of years. So it's a tag title match, and the big lads are just colliding. We get a double count out. Like, really, that's a pretty cheap finish. It really is. Like, one of the cheapest things they could do. But the LOD didn't want to lose the tag titles, even though they would lose them sometime a little bit later. Natural Disasters ended up winning the tag titles at some point. I believe from Money Inc., if I recall correctly, sometime in 92. So nevertheless. So, Sean Mooney. Who? I just love Heenan saying that. I like Sean Mooney. That line from Heenan. But Jimmy Hart and the Natural Disasters are yelling backstage because we got... It was a thing where it's like, oh my god, the Disasters technically won, so they should have been the tag team champions, but titles only change hands on a pin or submission. Well, that's not what happened. Mean Gene talks with Piper, and then we get a couple pre-tapes. We recap Shawn Michaels, watching Mario Jannetty dive through the window to escape. What an act of cowardice. Will you be serious? And then we just basically get a bunch of pre-tapes, and it's actually kind of fucking hilarious, all things considered. I like the fact that, they did this stuff, but I like that Lord Alfred Hayes was talking to Flair first. Lord Alfred Hayes, you can Google about him. Not exactly the best guy, but I drew number 3, and, when you want to be the best, you got to prove you're the best, all that, so on to infinity. So then we get Savage, cutting a pre-tape. We get Sid. God damn it, Sid. We get Ric Flair. We get the British Bulldog. The pre-tape got blown. I'm fucked. Production team, I'm fucked. I'm sorry. How it started and then how it's going, where he's passed out on the couch from a crack binge. Why am I so mean? What did I do? What did Bulldog ever do to warrant that? May he rest in peace. Howard Finkel goes over the rules. Jack Tunney comes out as a de facto president who, helped run Toronto, or at least in part helped run Toronto. And when they decided to go with the WWF instead of Jim Crockett Promotions, I still, whoever wins this will become the new champion. Ben Beth President says, Noriega, will you be serious? And Bobby Heenan was absolutely on fire here for the 92 Rumble. So was Monsoon. I don't want to, and even mean to discredit or discount anything that Monsoon contributed to commentary in general or on this night. But the 1992 Rumble, and I got a bunch of notes here, might go a bit long, but I just really wanted to talk about the fact that this particular Rumble, for me in particular, is just so goddamn iconic. Because even though I was only 11 at the time, I had just turned 11 a few days prior, I did get to see this at a buddy's house because his uncle used to own or order the pay-per-views and then watch it on VHS later. And it starts out with British Bulldog and Ted DiBiase at 1 and 2 respectively. And it was funny to see Ted get upset, like, not get upset, but just like say to Davey, stay down, I'm trying to do something here, because Davey tried to get up and he's like, nope, do this, and boom. hits that side fist drop. DiBiase got tossed out pretty quickly. Sherry looked amazing. My God, boy howdy, who could resist Sherry at that point? Ric Flair comes out at number 3. No, damn it. It's like, kiss your meal ticket goodbye. Watch your language. Sit down before you have a heart attack. That's not fair to Flair. It's not fair to Flair. It's so great. So good. And Bobby Heenan, I'm going to have to apologize to people. I don't think I'd be objective here. When have you ever been objective? Sags of the Nasty Boys shows up at number 4. He's out pretty quickly. Haku comes out at number 5 in very colorful pants. A lot of mullets in this match. That's one thing about the 90s. A lot of mullets in this match. But Shawn Michaels at number 6. Speaking of mullets, Shawn and Ric Flair going at about 16 years before Ric Flair would have his retirement match, but he couldn't retire because he didn't know how to manage his money. And there we go, Flair and Shawn, that was really goddamn cool. We had the Barbarian, or we had Santana. And number 7, casual racism from Bobby Heenan. Hit the flying jalapeno. It's like, the flying forearm. Look at the tights, they're green. And I did, at one point there's like a low blow, and says, I'd do that to my grandmother if I had to. I'm sure you would. And then Barbarian at number 8. Barbarian doesn't like Flair. Barbarian doesn't like anybody. When I was managing him, he barely liked me. Why do you think you call him a Barbarian? He's not a hairdresser on his day off, And Texas Tornado in at number 9. And it was cool because, of course, for those that know, Kerry Von Erich won the NWA Championship in Texas Stadium in front of like 32,000-something fans. I mean, it might have been more, but that was 32,000-something paid. Big goddamn boost. Big gate at that time. It was like over 400,000. Pretty big deal. Fritz came out of retirement, all that stuff. I reviewed that event. You can check that out. But the Iron Claw got it wrong because Kerry did not lose his foot that very night. Nevertheless, Kerry and Flair, they had a brief interaction, and Kerry just showed enough of the fire, just a little bit. Just wish that Kerry could have kept, both feet on the ground. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm not. But nevertheless, Kerry did show a little bit of that fire. Was in actually for a few minutes. Repo Man came in at number 10, shrieking Simon Miller noises. I like Simon Miller. He always talks about Repo Man. Greg Valentine at number 11. 1 year after he went 45 minutes. He didn't go with that long this time. Nikolai Volkov, who was in his mid-40s at this point and actually he leapt over the top like it was nothing. Of course, he faced up against Repo Man, who was Barry Darsow, and they were the Russians back in Mid-South, and that ended pretty quickly when Nikolai was out within a minute, 90 seconds tops. So, Boss Man got a big pop. This is when Boss Man was still over. He had been a heel for a while, turned face sometime heading into Mania 6. And to be quite honest, Ray Traylor, he's another one I wish was still here. I mean, apparently a very funny, fun-loving guy, a very genuine person. I never met any of these wrestlers, but from all accounts, somebody that a lot of people respected. And then Hercules at number 14, and you even take a look at Hercules in 87, and you take a look at Hercules in 92, he aged quickly, fast. So after all that, Boss Man is like the only one left out of all this. Boss Man battles Flair a little bit, and then tumbles over the top and hits his neck snaps against the bottom rope. Looked really goddamn painful, but that was really cool. Flair is staying along, Sarah is like catching his breath, trying to get that oxygen inside that body, and suddenly at number 15. Roddy Piper to a big pump. Oh no, of all the people, anyone but Piper, and the people are coming up. And they had nice ebbs and flows to this. It's one of the good things that Pat Patterson did was incorporate the Royal Rumble. And also the stuff he did, maybe not with the Ring Boys, but he did a bunch of other stuff too, because I'm not going to forget that, and neither should anybody else. And Pat Patterson's burned in hell for it. Along with Terry Garvin. And along with a bunch of other people. So, let's just say where there's smoke, there's possibilities. So let's just say that. Jake the Snake Roberts shows up, gets saved by, tries to DDT Flair. Piper saves him. And, oh, thank you, Roddy. It's a kilt. It's not a skirt. It's a kilt. And then a figure four, and then he starts kicking both of them. Why you no good freak? You skirt-wearing freak. I love Bobby. God, I wish that Bobby's voice hadn't been taken from him, and I just wish that Bobby was still here. I mean, my God. Imagine if Bobby had had his voice and been able to have a podcast. He would have been so entertaining. Jim Duggan shows up at number 17, still getting big pops. IRS shows up at number 18, in no hurry to get there. Jimmy Snuka at number 19, jogging to the ring. He's wasting time. He's wasting energy. He's not wasting time. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. I know you don't. Again, so goddamn good. Undertaker in at number 20. He quickly eliminates Snuka. That is not the only time that Jimmy Snuka would meet The Undertaker. Jimmy Snuka deserved to be seen by an Undertaker back in 1983, as far as I'm goddamn concerned, for what he did to Nancy Argentina. And never suffered a goddamn bit of consequence for it. So, yeah, Snuka ended up not lasting very long after that. Randy Savage came out at number 21 and instantly ran for Jake the Snake Roberts, got attacked. Eventually, Jake tried to get his hands on him. Savage would attack him, hits the high knee, jumps over the top, and then they had to make it where, he wasn't propelled over the top rope, so he's able to get back in the ring. I mean, which they would, completely negate later when Kane would eliminate himself from the 1999 Rumble. I think the 99 Rumble. Good to your God, I never want to revisit that one again. But it was funny. It was funny because they had to justify all that stuff. So Savage is in there. Jake is gone. Berserker's in there. John Nord, a guy that, bless his heart, I don't think was ever really all that good. Virgil in number 23. Heenan, of course, says, he one time had that $1 million championship belt. Of course, he stole it, but he still had it. He did not. He came out at number 23, right? This is Bobby Heenan saying this, by the way. I would never say any comments like this. But he says, number 23, right? Who knows how many bags he went through in the back? Who would make jokes about black wrestlers like that? My word. How dare he? Anyway, so you have Virgil. Rest in peace, Virgil. This is a year after he received the biggest pop of his goddamn career, turning on Ted DiBiase. It actually just got uploaded to the WWE Vault very recently. So, Colonel Mustafa, a.k.a. the Iron Sheik, even though we know it was the Iron Sheik, they still called him Colonel Mustafa, and that whole Slaughter turn never really worked. Or at least adding Sheik didn't really help, and yeah, he was number 24. Rick Martel was number 25. Hogan came in at number 26 to a pop, mostly. There were some boos, but there was more than enough of a pop. And Berserker got tossed. Taker got tossed. Taker landed on his goddamn feet. Virgil and Duggan end up getting eliminated. And then Skinner came out at number 27. Steve Kern, bless Steve Kern, but yeah, there we go. Sergeant Slaughter in at number 28. Just so funny that he beat the Ultimate Warrior the year before to win the WWF title. He was a heel up to SummerSlam 91, and now he's just suddenly back to being a face. He was done pretty much with his full-time in-ring career a couple years after this, because he was a commissioner by 1997, or the de facto commissioner, and he makes sporadic appearances, but yeah, there we go. Also, I do want to shout that Sarge's ex-wife is a dumb bitch for discrediting the wrestling business. If you didn't think that the wrestling business was any good, you shouldn't have married the guy. You dumb broad. Anyway, so Sid came out, and Sid. I love Sid. Even if Sid's offense at times... Sid's offense was always intense, but also he looked confused at times. But man, Sid was great. Just had that aura about him. Slaughter took that corner bump, pillar to post, going over the top. And Sarge at that point was in his at least early to mid 40s. And that looked pretty goddamn deadly. But he was willing to take it. He broke out that big bump. And then Warlord in number 30. Hogan and Sid tossed him out. So yeah, then bodies are starting to fly out. We get down to Flair, Hogan, Sid, and Savage. And then while Sid's got Savage up in the corner, Savage gets tossed out. And then we have Sid, we have Hogan, we have Flair. And they're battling and everything. Flair takes the corner bump, doesn't quite get it. Just doesn't quite get it. The over the corner, over the top. Doesn't quite get it. But then Hogan is trying to eliminate him, and then Sid comes up barely throwing Hogan out. Then Hogan's like, "You can't do that. You can't do that to me, brother. Why the hell would you do that to me, brother? Brother. Oh no, Hogan's having a stroke. Hit him. Reboot him. Reboot him. Hogan, what's this venue called? Say it right, Hulk." Great. Now we have to fucking just pretend he didn't say it. But, Sid ends up getting pulled out by Hogan, which is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Like, why in the world would you do that, knowing full well, that, the crowd's not going to be on your side. Hogan might have thought that, but not in 92. Had this been 89, maybe they would have been on his side. 92 was a totally different ballgame. Also because Sid was cool. And Flair wins. Heenan goes nuts. Yes. I told you, I'm going back there. And then Monsoon's left to basically call the action in the aftermath. Well, Flair, by the way, won the championship. So he's totally out of the picture at this point. Goes backstage. And Sid and Hogan are facing off and everything after Sid basically palms him in the back of the head. You have agents like Notorious, Creep, Terry Garvin, Pat Patterson, all these people, like just this insane stuff. And speaking of people that just were not happy when, Hogan did what he did, you then have the producer who really wanted Sid to win this. And even though I told you he didn't win it, you got very upset when Sid got eliminated, didn't you? Didn't you? This is a producer, by the way, for those that are new. Adopt, don't shop. Yeah, you liked the Flair one, and you liked when Sid threw Hebner to the ground and Hogan was doing the cup to the ear thing, and they booed him. That cat hates me. That cat hates me so much. But anyway, yeah, it's just Hogan thought the crowd was going to be outside. Boo! And see, they added out in the original broadcast. That didn't work this time. They left it in. Sid even points at a sign, Hulk-oo! Hulk-oo! And it's so good. It's so good. And then this would build to Hogan and Sid at Mania 8, which didn't work. But what's great is Flair is backstage with a tear in my eye. This is the greatest moment of my life. When you claim to be the best, you need to prove you're the best and everything. And I'm paraphrasing because I always get some of this promo mixed up. But this is the only championship that proves that you are the absolute best. Basically sticking it to Jim Herd. Jim Herd proving he didn't know how to run a goddamn wrestling company. He didn't even know how to run a Pizza Hut properly. But held up the championship. Heenan, perfect. Flair, they're all celebrating. Mean Gene's there. And it's like, well, Ric Flair, I put that cigarette out. I fucking love Mean Gene. God damn it. But there it is. A lengthier review of the 1992 Royal Rumble. The best Royal Rumble of all time. Nothing will beat it. I'm not saying there have not been ones that haven't been close. The 2020 Rumble was pretty good, actually, even though I had to go back and rewatch it. And there have been some good ones. Nothing will beat the 1992 edition. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky handles in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I'll see you soon.